Hello, my name is Sharon Hill. I am a clinical associate professor in the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State University. On behalf of the host committee, I would like to welcome you to the Women and Girls Leadership and Empowerment Conference. We are so privileged and thrilled to have you with us today. The Women and Girls Leadership and Empowerment Conference is in partnership with the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. This is a program of the U.S. Department of State with funding provided by the U.S. government and administered by IREX, a nonprofit global development and education organization. The Women and Girls Leadership and Empowerment Conference was selected for the Reciprocal Exchange component of the Mandela Washington Fellowship. The Reciprocal Exchange provides American professionals with the opportunity to travel to Africa to collaborate on projects with fellows. This conference was originally planned to take place in Dakar, Senegal. However, due to COVID-19, we decided to host it virtually because we did not want to postpone such an important conference. But it gave us the opportunity to open the conference to a much broader audience. So welcome again. Our theme is inspiring impact through generations, discovering, recovering, and amplifying our voices. This conference includes amazing speakers, panel sessions, breakout sessions, and professional networking sessions. There are also exhibitors from organizations that are key to building and empowering women and youth across the world. Please click on the information desk in the navigation bar if you have any questions or concerns, and let us know what the issue is. Through this conference, we want you to discover, recover, and amplify your voice so that you can visualize your untapped power and potential, overcome barriers and challenges, ignite change and transformation, chart your path forward, empower women and girls, and strengthen your voice. Next, Mrs. Bamadela Adamola Olatuja will introduce our distinguished keynote speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Dear attendees to the Women and Girls Leadership and Empowerment Conference, I'm honored to introduce to you the keynote speaker for this conference. She's my leader, mentor, and friend, Her Excellency, Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi is a feminist activist, writer, author, gender and development specialist, policy advocate, and social sector expert. She holds a Master's of Arts in Gender and Society from Middlesex University, United Kingdom, and PhD honoris causa in sociology from Taisho Larin University of Education in Nigeria. She served as the director of Akinamamawa Africa, an international development organization for African women based in London, with an African regional office in Kampala, Uganda, from 1991 to 2001. While Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi was the director of AMWA, she established the African Women's Leadership Institute, a training and networking forum for young African women, which has produced well over 6,000 women leaders across Africa. She co-founded the African Women's Development Fund, the first African-wide grant-making foundation for women organizations based in Ghana, and she has served there as CEO from 2001 to 2010. AWDF has supported thousands of women rights organizations in 42 African countries with millions of dollars in grants. Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Above Whispers Media Group, an online forum focused on specializing leadership development for women, abovewhispers.com. Recently, she started the Rapper Network, an online mentoring and support program for young women. She served as United Nations Women Nigeria Senior Special Advisor from 2017 to 2018, and she's currently a visiting Senior Research Fellow at the African Leadership Center at King's College in London. As a two-term First Lady of Ekiti State in Nigeria, she has championed and recorded many legislative successes. In 2011, Erelu Fayemi led the campaign in Ekiti State, Nigeria to enact gender-based violence prohibition law and championed its revision in October 2019. She also championed Equal Opportunities Bill in 2013, HIV Anti-Stigma Bill in 2014, and Treatment, Care and Protection Bill for Sexually Abused Minors in 2020. Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi serves on the executive board of African Women's Development Fund and also on the governing council of Elizade University in Nigeria. She is currently the chair of Ekiti State Gender-Based Management Committee, as well as the chair of Ekiti State AIDS Control Agency. Her Excellency is the chair, Nigeria Governors' Wives Against Gender-Based Violence. She is the author of many books, and you can see some by her side. Ladies, please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that graceful introduction, my dear sister Bamidele Ademola Olateju. I am truly delighted to have been invited to deliver the keynote address at this very important conference that has decided to focus on women and girls in Africa. And so I'm going to make my remarks around making the voices of African women and girls count. I thank Dr. Hill and her colleagues, as well as my good friend Bamidele, for making this possible. And I congratulate all the participants and fellows, and I wish you all the very best in your endeavors. Exactly 26 years ago, I attended the fourth UN Conference for Women in Beijing, China. At the time, I was the executive director of Akinamama Africa, an international development organization for African women based in London. I was responsible for a group of 20 women attending the Beijing conference. And these women were from the United Kingdom, other European countries, and some from the African continent. We arrived at our hotel in Beijing around 11 a.m. in the morning. I did not finish checking in till 4 p.m. I tried to explain to the Chinese, the Chinese concierge that the delegation I was responsible for would be leaving at different times and other people would be coming in. It was supposed to be a straightforward explanation and administrative transaction. I tried to explain to the first person, and after listening to me for a while, the Chinese gentleman would say, "Wait a minute," which I understood to mean, "Wait a minute." And then he will call someone else to listen to me. And then I'd have to start the explanation about my check-in needs for my delegation all over again. And I would get a bit further with the next person, and then he would say, wait a minute, and then call someone else, and then I would have to start my story all over again. I had to tell the same story 4 times with the same wait a minute. And of course, I grew increasingly frustrated. At that time, most of my colleagues, all my colleagues had left me at the check-in desk. And that's how come I was there till 4 p.m. because after they finally understood what it is I was trying to say, they then forced me to write my full name and address and passport number behind every single traveler's check I was using for payment. And you're talking about traveler's checks to the tune of over 30,000 US dollars. So that's why it took the better part of the day. Now, I have told this story a number of times because for me, it is symbolic of how since the Beijing conference, we have witnessed our progress as African women with 10 steps forward and 5 steps back, having to explain the same thing over and over again with the same wait a minute moment, wait a minute. And as we look at where we are 26 years after the Beijing conference, if someone was to ask me, what do you think we have achieved? Where do you think we are now? My response to such a question would be, well, there is good news and there is bad news. So it depends on the kind of news you want to hear from me first. But usually when I am responding to the issue of whether you want good news or bad news, I tend to give the bad news first. And so 26 years after Beijing, with all our wait a minute moments, millions of African women and girls still suffer from the feminization of poverty. We still lack access to basic resources, and we still suffer from various diseases, violent conflict in our countries, and the use of culture, religion, and tradition to render women and girls voiceless. Gender-based violence, femicide, sexual assault, harmful traditional practices, religious fundamentalisms, voluntary and involuntary commercial sex work, trafficking, institutionalized gender discrimination, all make private and public spaces for African women and girls very unsafe. And all these issues continue to hinder our progress. And there are a number of factors that continue to work hand in hand to make this very difficult for us to make these issues difficult for us to grapple with. And some of these factors include entrenched patriarchal power, violent conflict and displacement, endemic poverty, religious and cultural conservatism, and a lack of political will. And I'll come back to address the issue of political will shortly. So that's the bad news. But there's also quite a lot of good news. 26 years after the Beijing conference, we can lay claim to a number of achievements and successes as African women. And no matter how hard it gets for us, it's very important for us to remember these gains because it's easy for these gains to be eroded if they are not sustained. First of all, one of the achievements we should be proud of is the existence of international, regional, and national normative frameworks, which aim to promote, protect, and guarantee women's rights and gender equality. Many African countries, for example, have ratified the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW, and the 1989 UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Many countries have also signed on to the UN Resolution 1325 on women in peace and security, and also the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals. The African Union adopted the protocol the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, known as the AU Protocol on Women's Rights, or the Maputo Protocol. And this is one of the most important documents for women across the African continent. It's a significant milestone for us in the African women's movement. And following on from all these regional and international frameworks, there are also many sub-regional, national, and local laws and policies which have been made possible by the agency of the African women's movement. Second, the notion of women as leaders across our continent has been popularized. And unlike 25 to 30 years ago, it is no longer strange to see women campaigning for very senior positions in public life. Due to the remarkable success of women in elected and appointed positions in some countries, we have changed political landscapes. So for example, if you look at countries like Liberia, where we saw the first democratically elected president, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who served for 2 terms. In countries like Rwanda, which has the highest number of women in their parliament, at least in the world, at least 64%. And in South Africa, which has constitutional guarantees for gender equality and women's representation. So in this time, 26 years after Beijing, it is no longer strange for African women to be able to stand up and say we can lead in our communities. Another thing that we have witnessed over the years as a significant gain is the fact that African women and girls now have more access to educational opportunities than ever before. Not only is the enrollment of girls in schools at very high levels in some places, the enrollment in schools of girls actually exceeds that of boys. In addition, girls are doing very well in tertiary institutions, graduating with top degrees and winning prizes and excelling in areas such as medicine, science, and engineering. And there also seems to be an unprecedented number of female role models on faculties across the continent and non-teaching staff. And they serve to inspire new generations of female students. And then we've also noted that there's more awareness of issues around women's rights and gender equality across all our communities. We have seen more acceptance of the need to address discrimination against women in terms of access to education and employment, and also the need to address all forms of violence against women. And then, for me, most importantly, the women's movement across the continent, however we would like to define or describe it, has been able to build consensus around key issues of importance to women. And these issues range from non-discrimination in public and private, economic empowerment and livelihoods for women, importance of education and training, the issue of bodily integrity, reproductive rights and health, freedom from all forms of violence, peace and security, and access to leadership and decision-making. So everywhere you go across the continent, you'll find African women's rights activists and thinkers, professionals, and women in the public sector, and women in the academia, all addressing one or a combination of these issues. And so having laid all this out, both in terms of the rollbacks and what it is we have achieved as women on the continent, how do we sustain these gains? And what is our role, particularly as young women, in moving these agendas forward for our generation and the next generation? I would like to propose very quickly 10 areas in which I'd like to call a roadmap in which we can sustain the agency of African women and girls and continue to make our voices count. Number one, we need to understand the importance of feminism and its role in deconstructing patriarchal power and privilege on our continent. In my own definition, Feminism is a global struggle against all forms of patriarchal oppression. Feminism is not about hating men. Feminism, in my books, does not mean misandry. Feminism is about interrogating all the systems and structures that continue to make women second-class citizens throughout their life cycle. All the political, economic, religious, social, cultural, technological systems that perpetuate gender stereotypes and continue to push women and girls to the margins. If we all understand this and we all take a stand on contesting these structures and institutions, then we will be well on our way to ensuring that we create a future in which our voices as women and girls will count. Very often we hear the saying, women are each other's worst enemy. My dear sisters, women are not each other's worst enemy. Patriarchy is our real enemy. And we should also note that the plan is not to replace a patriarchy with a matriarchy. We want a world that is equitable and fair to all. Second, we need to continue to use legislative and policy frameworks to break barriers. Remember, I said earlier on that legal and policy frameworks have been one of the gains that we are proud of as African women across the continent. We need to sustain this by demanding for accountability from our government, because it is one thing to have laws in place, policies or constitutional guarantees. If there is no accountability to ensure implementation, then we are only going to have these policies on paper. So we need to continue to push for accountability. We need to continue to engage in policy advocacy, because we still have a lot of laws and policies to put in place in our various countries and in our various constituencies. But where we have such laws and policies in place, there's a whole new world out there in terms of translating these documents into something that will have meaning in the lives of ordinary women. And as I talk about ensuring that we have this policy framework implemented, I would like to make reference to the fact that one of the key gains from the Beijing process has been the existence of national gender machineries, what we call women affairs ministries or gender and development ministries across our countries. These institutions are supposed to be the engine room where policies are made, are supposed to be places where issues around women's empowerment, issues around gender stereotypes, national development policies are translated into significant gains for women at grassroots level. Unfortunately, a lot of these gender machineries are very weak and have poor leadership. They have very poor funding. And so one of the key tasks that we have is to continue to call for good political leadership of these gender machineries, for investments in gender disaggregated data, for a well-trained and motivated workforce, and to ensure that these institutions can continue to play their role in implementing the relevant policies that are put there to address. Third, I would like to advise that all of us in positions of leadership, or those aspiring to positions of leadership, should develop a leadership agenda. You will not maximize your opportunities if you have no leadership agenda. It does not have to be the kind of transactional agenda which is usually associated with conventional leadership practices. I'm talking about a leadership agenda grounded in ethical and transformative leadership, in social justice, fairness, and truth. And so, my dear sisters, please, as we move forward as feminists and women's rights activists in positions of influence, let us ensure that these positions of ours are used to change the norm, are used to do business unusual. And it is one of the challenges I've taken up myself as I found myself in this position as First Lady of Ekiti State from my background as a feminist activist, as a gender specialist, as a feminist philanthropist, practitioner, as a social entrepreneur. I now find myself in this political space for the first time in my life. And what I've been able to do is to leverage on my previous experience and use that to build alliances and partnerships and relationships to get a number of things done. And that is why, as you heard from my introduction by Sister Bamidele, I've been able to get at least 4 laws passed in Ekiti State to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. I have been able to ensure that Ekiti became the first state in Nigeria to domesticate the national gender policy in 2011. I have been able to advocate for the establishment of a family court in Ekiti State, and that was done in 2012. I have been able to lead a robust response to gender-based violence issues in the state. And as a result of that, we have a 208-bed and transit home and vocational center for women and girls. We have a sexual assault referral center, and we have a gender-based violence management committee, which I chair, and which ensures that we have an effective response to all women and girls in the state who need our help, underlined with a zero tolerance policy for gender-based violence in the state. So those are just a few examples of how I've been able to articulate and act on a leadership agenda here in Ekiti State. Fourth, I believe, following on closely from the issue of having a leadership agenda, if you're in a position of leadership, you need to envision a legacy, because you are not going to be in that position forever. Hopefully, we will be leaders in various spheres throughout our life cycle, but any position of authority or influence that you hold is not likely to be forever. And so we have to think of what we are going to leave behind. We have to think of the one thing that you know you can put in place that you'll be remembered by. Because if you're in a position of leadership and you are not able to leave a legacy behind, then you are going to make it difficult for the case to be made for another woman to occupy that position. Not all of us will be able to pass a law. Not all of us will be able to build structures, but there should be something you're able to do, no matter how small, even if it is to advocate for a creche to be built in the workplace, or for you to advocate for the existence of a maternity policy for women in the institution you work for. No matter how small it is, try to leave a legacy that will ensure that other people can build on what you have done. My fifth point is around being politically engaged. Whether it is across the African continent or in other parts of the world, we've all seen what happens when we leave the political space open to others to take over. When we cede active engagement in political spaces to others who we think are more qualified to be there. And what tends to happen is when we end up with the kind of democratically elected leaders that we are not happy with or that we are not proud of, we have no one else to blame but ourselves. So I'm not saying that we all have to be politicians. I'm not saying we all have to run for political office, but I'm saying we all have to be engaged. So please find time to go home, wherever you call home, to your constituency, to your local environment, to your villages, engage in community projects, award scholarships if you're in a position to do so. You don't have to have any political ambition in mind, but we all have to be actively engaged to ensure that we have the kind of people right from community level up to national level who need to be leading our countries and communities. And those decisions start with us. We should stop leaving those decisions to other people to make on our behalf. We will not resolve the leadership crisis in our respective countries unless we address the issue of leadership and unless we get more credible women into leadership. My sixth point is around mentoring and intergenerational organizing, and that is self-explanatory. As I said earlier, I went to Beijing 26 years ago. I was a young woman then. I'm not so young anymore, maybe youngish, but not young anymore. But then I know I have a responsibility to pass on the things that I know, to pass on the information that I have been able to acquire, the things I've learned from those who have gone ahead of me, to other people as well. So we all need to put in place processes for mentoring and intergenerational organizing. And the way I have experienced this, it is not about older women serving as matrons and passing on their knowledge to the younger women who don't know anything. It's about working together. It's about building on what we know as older and younger women. It is about supporting one another and building ourselves up. There are lots of things I do not know, and I rely on younger women to provide me with the information and the knowledge. And when my help is needed, I make sure that I provide it. So intergenerational organizing, I believe, is one of the ways in which we can sustain the gains we have made in our movements. Following on from that, my 7th point is to do with using information, communications, and technology for movement building. One of the things this generation has over the older generation is the opportunities that have been provided through the use of ICTs to mobilize, to organize, and place issues out there. I usually tell people the first email I sent in my life was in 1995, around April 1995, when we were preparing for the Beijing conference, because it was the only way we could register for the conference, both for the NGO forum and the official conference. And at the time I was based in London, so it had nothing to do with being based on the continent and not having access because of lack of connectivity. Many of us in the women's movement in the UK at the time were not, we're not ICT savvy. We did not know what to do. And so we all had to learn. But now this is something this generation takes for granted. And it's absolutely critical. ICTs can be used for mentoring, capacity building, for a whole range of issues. It's one of the reasons why I started the Rapper Network last year, a mentoring, capacity building, and enterprise development platform for young women. And it now has almost 4,000 members. So let us continue to use ICTs for movement building, for placing issues out there, and for ensuring that we can continue to make our voices count. Now, my 8th point is to do with not just young women, but for women of all ages. We need to prepare for life's transitions. We are all in transition from one phase of our life to the other. And from what I've experienced, we all know this. We all know we are in transition, but we hardly prepare ourselves. Some of these transitions are linked to joyful milestones, such as academic accomplishments, marriage, childbirth, promotion, our children's successes, and so on. And some of these milestones might be unpleasant, such as loss of livelihoods, death, divorce, a failed business venture, illness, a whole range of things. Let us learn to reflect on our various transitions and prepare as and when necessary. So for example, do you have an income generating savings or investment plan as a young woman? How will you take care of yourself in the future? If you happen to be married, what would happen if your spouse was no longer in the picture? Would you be able to take care of yourself and your children? Are you able to learn a new skill in case you need it? In these COVID-19 times, with all the things we have seen, people losing their livelihoods and all kinds of things collapsing around us, are you making the necessary adaptations? You need to ensure that you have the life skills that are commensurate with your stage in life. So for example, we all need to know about how to manage our health. We all need to know about financial literacy. We all need to have some degree of mental health awareness. Essentially, wherever we are in life, we have to be prepared for a transition, because the last thing you want is for something to hit you and you're unprepared. My 9th point is around telling your story. Not everyone will be able to write a book. Yet, you have to find a way to tell your story at a time that feels right for you. It could be a book, it could be an essay, a short film, an exhibition, anything that speaks for you, anything that tells people who you are, what you have done, and how you have done it. Someone somewhere is interested in hearing from you. You have the right to a voice. You have the right to tell your story while you can control the narrative. And last but not least, my 10th point is around bringing out a rapper for other women. 2 years ago at a conference in Lagos, I told the story of a woman who went into labor in a market somewhere in Uganda in the 1990s. And it happened at the time I was there running a workshop. The women in the marketplace rallied round to help this woman who had gone into labor. They all brought out their wrappers and they held the wrappers up to shield her from prying eyes. I use these wrappers as a metaphor for protection, responsibility, compassion, empathy, respect, all those values that make us human. Let us bring out our wrappers for other women every day, at work or in our private lives. Every woman has a wrapper to bring out, and every woman needs one. And the way it works is, the more wrappers you bring out for others, the more wrappers will come out for you on a day and at a time that you will need them. So my dear sisters and the handful of brothers who might be listening in, patriarchy tells us many lies, that we are not good enough, that we ought to have everything all at once. And if we don't, we have failed. If we don't, we are less than everyone else. Tell your story. Write it if you can. Even when you run into wait a minute situations and you feel like giving up, remember that one of the most important things in life is being able to survive, to tell your story with your own voice, regardless of your age. Stand before your mirror. If you can't do it every day, do it every now and then, and tell your reflection, your name. My name is Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. I am enough. I will always be enough. Let us all rise and set our sights on all the great things we know we can accomplish. Let us stop being afraid or complacent. Let us move out of our comfort zones. Let us stop passing things on to the next person. You are the person. You are the change. You have the power to shape the future. You can't wait a minute. You can't wait a minute. Use your spaces and power well in the service of others, particularly women and girls. We are done waiting a minute. Our time is now. Thank you, and I look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. We have a number of questions for you from attendees at the conference. The first question: what can we, who do not hold leadership positions, do in our communities to make change?
Do you want me to answer the questions one after the other, or do you want to give me a few questions to respond?
Yeah, so far we have 3 questions. I think maybe we should ask one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes, thank you very much, Bamidele. As I said in my presentation, we occupy different spaces. So not all of us would be in a senior position of leadership to effect change at certain levels. But I believe that wherever we are, there's something we can do. If you're in a community and you feel strongly about something, I think the first step would be to look for allies. There will always be someone else who shares your own opinion, who believes in the things that you do. So if, for example, in your communities, there's a practice of female genital mutilation, I'm sure there'll be other women, older women, or your peers who feel the same way. identify who they are and try and work together. There is safety in numbers. And also, no change is too small. Even if it is identifying the fact that there are some elderly people in your community who don't have someone to care for them, and they often go hungry, go around and organize a food bank. If people are in a poor community, they might not have a lot of money to give, but you might be able to find people who give you an extra tuber of yam that they have. They might be able to give you some vegetables. They might be able to give you some pepper, and you can build on that to expand it. As I said, if you work with other people, other opportunities will present themselves for you to be able to engage, at that level, providing leadership in your community, and you can take it from there.
Thank you. The next question: what are some ways that we can use to push our leaders for accountability?
Okay. One of the ways in which you can do that is to, again, look at how you are organized. And that is why civic space is so important. That is why women's organizations and their agency are key. As someone who has worked in the women's movement for so many years and been a part of the African Women's Development Fund that was established specifically to fund women's rights organizing across the continent, I know how important it is to have women and their organizations leading these issues around change. So try as much as possible to identify a women's rights organization around you that you can be a part of. If there is none, you can join together with other people and set something up. If you happen to be a professional, for example, if you happen to be a lawyer, then you can join one of the FIDA chapters, because FIDA has been one of the most productive and resourceful women's rights organizations across the continent through the activities of their local chapters. You can hold local leaders accountable through political organizing. Remember, I said you should be politically active and engaged. And so if you engage in this, then you can get your leaders to understand that you will hold them accountable politically when the next election cycle comes. When women decide to make it expensive for political leaders to ignore them or to ignore their needs and concerns, then we'll be making a headway. So the same way in which in other parts of the world, like in the United States, for example, we talk about the Black vote, the union's vote, the women's vote. In our own communities as well, politicians need to be concerned about the women's vote. Our politicians are used to women coming out to support the party machinery, to sing and to dance and to clap. But we also have issues of concern that they need to address. We are concerned about peace and security. We are concerned about livelihoods. We are concerned about our health and about violence in public and private. We are concerned about access to education for our children. And so if our leaders are not prepared to make these things available, then we are simply not going to vote for them. So there are different ways of holding our government accountable, because if we don't do that, then it will continue to be business as usual.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question: how can we improve our public speaking skills?
Well, I believe we can learn. We can learn by watching and listening to people that we admire. There are a lot of online courses and programs that we can take, but it can just be simply, things that, are free. We can listen to people who we think speak quite well, who make sense when we listen to them, and try and see where we go with that. Practice makes perfect. And so if you have an opportunity to speak, just speak, don't be nervous. And even if you make mistakes, you will get better with time. And the more you do it, the better you will get at it. The important thing is for you to make sure you get your message across and make sure that you try and communicate as clearly as possible and with a minimum of jargon. Because one of the things I believe puts people off when they listen to public speakers is their use of jargon. So it's not necessary to impress people with how much you know. Use words that are simple, but can convey the message as persuasively as possible. And most of all, just try and relax and have fun.
Thank you, ma. The next question. I'm getting messages on WhatsApp telling me that in some places now, 10 people are huddled to one computer watching you. In places like Botswana, places like Kenya. That is so good to know. The question, what advice can you give to young women who are politicians?
Well, first of all, I would say to young women who are politicians, congratulations on making that decision. Then you should know that there is no level playing field in politics. And it's the same for men as it is for women. I know this because when my husband went into politics in 2004, he was considered to be an outsider. My husband is a human rights activist. He's a scholar. He had never been he had been politically engaged as a political activist, but he had never been involved in elective politics before. And so it was very easy for him to be branded as an outsider. Women are the perpetual outsiders in political circles. It is always believed that we are there on sufferance, that we don't belong, that we have to be invited to belong. So however it is we find ourselves in political spaces, let us make sure that we claim those spaces. You have a right to be there. You have a right to a voice. It is important as a young politician to have mentors. So try and find people who can support you, can support your aspirations. It is important for you to prove your worth, because the way in which you get ahead in politics is to prove to people that you can add value, that you can deliver votes, and that you can stick with the party ideology or party agenda that in ways in which benefits the community. And that is what will give your political leaders confidence to be able to give you a ticket to run to represent them. You also need, as a woman in politics, to be extremely careful, because one of the things I've seen male politicians do is, to use, divide and rule tactic. So they will raise some women up to, and to battle other women, and there'll be all kinds, of things going on, and the men will step very neatly into the background and let the women duke it out. And that's when we hear women are their own worst enemies. Don't allow yourself to be used in that way, and don't buy into it. As I said in my presentation, patriarchy is women's worst enemy. So try as much as possible. I know it's not easy, but try as much as possible to work in solidarity with other women. Don't let yourself be used as a tool against another woman. Don't be involved in slut shaming or slandering another woman. The men do that to themselves all the time, and that's their problem if they want to carry on that way. But as women in politics, one of the commitments we need to be making is that we would do business unusual. Feminist leadership is about bringing a new dynamic into the leadership space, new values, and a different set of ethics. And so as women in politics, we won't always get it right. And just remember, in politics, 2 + 2 is not 4. So expect surprises, expect to be shocked, but be prepared, and just know that you're entitled to your voice, and just try and be the best that you can be. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. There's a question, interesting question from the Women Empowerment Circle in Southern Africa. Would you be available to do a virtual speech at an event for us, ma. We mentor young girls.
I would be delighted and honored. Absolutely. Just let me know when you would like it to happen. As I said in my presentation, one of the things I'm committed to is mentoring and intergenerational organizing. I want to share information and knowledge with younger women, and I'd like to learn from younger women. That's how I learned as well. And I would really welcome the opportunity. And as a Pan-Africanist, organizing across, cultures and across the various dynamics of, our countries in Africa has been something that I've always benefited from. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really, really upset with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, because it's minimizing our capacity to move around and engage with our various events across the continent. So yes, I would love the opportunity, and I'm honored that you would ask.
Thank you, ma. The next question, quite interesting. You have an intimidating resume. You have served as a UN Women Nigerian Senior Advisor. You are currently a visiting Senior Research Fellow at the African Leadership Center at King's College London. So this question comes from the university. What can universities do to better prepare young girls for feminist leadership? This might be a bit academic, but they want ideas and answers.
Thank you. I'm honored with that, description of me. There are a number of things that we can do, and I think creating the space is important. Encouraging young women to get together, to ask questions and share perspectives is important. Having women on the faculties who are prepared to give up their time and who are prepared to share their knowledge, either in structured sessions or in formal ways, is absolutely key as well. I think ensuring that there's literature available is important. Many people are unaware of the vast amount of literature that is out there that has been written by African women on African feminism, by Black feminist scholars in the United States, the contestations over the years around the space of Black and African feminists within the wider feminist space in terms of theory as well as practice. And that is what has led to rather damaging assumptions that feminist activism was imported into the African continent without a thorough grounding and analysis in how in our own indigenous communities in Africa, we have always had resistance to patriarchy. We've always had feminists in our communities. They might not have been called that, but we've always had them. And so if we can create the spaces where literature can be shared, where knowledge can be shared, where young women can be encouraged to look and to examine the whole process and evolution of feminist thinking and activism around the personal is political in terms that are, non-intimidated or basically demystified. I think that would be extremely helpful. It's something that most academic institutions need to be focused on now, because it's not a surprise, but it just needs to be pointed out that the more gains we make as a feminist movement globally, the more of a backlash we experience, with people talking about post-feminism. And there used to be this t-shirt that was sold by the Silver Moon bookshop in London when Silver Moon was in existence, the only feminist bookshop in the UK at the time. They used to sell this t-shirt, and I bought the t-shirt. Somehow I lost it. I will be a post-feminist in a post-patriarchy. So contestations around post-feminism, as far as I'm concerned, are very dubious. So the universities are spaces where we can continue to have these contestations, but at the same time, making sure that they're demystified in ways in which women, regardless of the spaces where they are located, can make it relevant to their everyday lives in their communities and the issues that are concerned to them.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We have about 5 minutes left, and we have 2 questions. I would like to read the two questions. One, what advice can you give to young women who are politicians? Two, how can younger women like myself benefit from your mentorship?
I believe I've answered the question. You've asked the question around young women as being politicians. I believe I've answered that.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, on the, but to reiterate, for young women in politics, get a mentor, know that 2+2 is not 4, so be prepared for surprises and shocks. Try and work with other women in the political space. Do not allow men in politics to use you against other female politicians because they are fond of divide and rule. And be very careful, in terms of the personal as political. It's okay to have personal relationships, but make sure that you are not being lulled into some kind of transactional arrangement, because again, that is pretty common. If you hang out today, I will make sure that your name gets on the list and so on. And then it turns out that they've made the same promise to 2 or 3 other young women politicians. So don't fall for that, and be very careful. Have eyes at the back of your head. They're not just 2 eyes in front, 2 eyes at the back of your head, because it's very easy for young women to be manipulated and for all kinds of obstacles to be placed in their way when it comes to that. Now, with regards to how you can benefit from my support and mentoring, please join the Rapper Network. I established the Rapper Network to provide information, support, and mentoring for young women. A lot of women of all ages are on the platform, but mostly young women. And it's also used for enterprise development, because there are some young women who have great ideas and need a small amount of capital to be able to start off what they're doing. And so through my foundation, Above Whispers Foundation, we provide support every now and then to those who want to take advantage of the small grants that we have to develop businesses. And then we can pass them on to other spaces like commercial banks or larger funders who can support the initiative. So join the Rapper Network, and I hope you'll be able to learn 1 or 2 things from the other sisters on the platform.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Erelu Bisi, Adeleye-Fayemi. The Rapper Network, I belong there. It's on Facebook. Just type the Rapper Network and you can join the group. We want to thank you so very much for a brilliant presentation, insightful answers to the questions asked. There are many people from Southern and East Africa who have enjoyed this program. I have been sent several chat messages. Thank you so much. And I think through Dr. Hill, they can get to you if they want to invite you to speak at any virtual forum. We thank you, the attendees, for logging on. Some of you had difficulties because this is kind of high tech. You didn't know how to get here from the auditorium, but you finally did. I think Dr. Hill will have to send out email for subsequent sessions so attendees can have it easier. Thank you very much, ma'am, for honoring us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed my time here, and I look forward to engaging with you outside of this space. Thank you.